was paid at Calvary. So instead of trying to repay you, I'm learning to simply obey you by giving up my life to you for all that you've given to me. I ask you, how many times will you pick me up when I keep on letting you down? And each time I will fall short of your glory, how far will forgiveness abound? And you answer, my child, I love you. And as long as you seek in my face, you'll walk in the power of my daily sufficient grace.
Good morning. Good to see everybody here together at church as a family. So let's go over our scripture today. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. That's a beautiful verse, and I feel like we want to expound on that a little bit today. How many of you guys remember the big fires in Southern California? It was in January, a little spark ignited a fire in the Palisades. It may have been from a power line or maybe even from another fire, but within 48 hours, 1,900 structures and $250 billion worth of damage occurred. And this is a picture of what that looked like. Now, I really appreciate the fact that our youth take notes. And so I want to make it a little interactive today. So I'm going to ask questions. And when I ask questions, it's only to people who are 16 years old and younger. Okay? And I'm going to ask you to fill in some blanks about Bible verses. So that's why I gave you the Bible verses. So my first question is, in what book of the Bible does the writer refer to the tongue as fire? Does anyone know which book of the Bible? That's kind of a hard question. I know I'm starting with a hard question. Okay, let me give you the answer. James 3, 5, and 6 says, even so the tongue is a little member and boasts great things. See how great a forest a little fire kindles, and the tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. Iniquity is a big word for sin. The tongue is so set among our members that it defiles the whole body and sets on fire the course of nature and is set on fire by hell. The tongue is a very powerful instrument. James goes on to say, now, kids, I want you to look this up. James 1:19. Okay, and the first person to fill in the blanks, raise your hand, okay? You know this, my beloved brothers and sisters. Now everyone must be quick to blank, slow to blank, and slow to anger. I'm sure the adults all can fill in these blanks, but kids, can you fill in the blanks for me? James, kind of near the end of the blank. You have the answer?
Quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry.
That's right. You know, today's message is not some deep theological discourse. We're not talking about Bible prophecy with time frames and dragons and beasts and horns. We're going to be talking about something that's much more practical. James says, you know this. We all know this. You know, one pastor said, it's not the things in the Bible that you don't understand that are difficult. It's the things that you do understand that are difficult. And we all know this. You know, we need to be careful about what we say. We need to be slow to become angry and be much more ready to listen. But it's a very difficult lesson to learn, isn't it? You know, when I was younger, kids, you go to the playground, right? And then on the playground, are kids always nice? Sometimes they insult you and say mean things, right? And you always want to come back and say something really sort of to get back at them, right? When I was never good at that. If I came up with something, it was always like the next day or something. So I could never have something good to come back with, right? And it's always like, it sort of bothered me. But if we read the wisest man on earth, Solomon, he says, do not be rash with your mouth, and let not your heart utter anything hastily before the Lord, for God is in heaven, and you on earth, therefore let your words be few. So we shouldn't be trying to get back at others with our words. We should be careful. Now, when I first moved to Guam, I saw that there are water stores everywhere. Now, that's the first. Like, in the U.S., there are not a lot of water stores. People don't go around buying water. Why is it on Guam that everyone's buying water? Well, okay, the tap water doesn't taste very good. I understand that. And so what is it that we do to the water to make it taste better? We filter it. Like at my house, we have this reverse osmosis filter system. There's like 5 stages that the water goes through to clean out all the stuff that makes it taste not very good, right? And so in the same way, we need to filter our words. We don't want our words to be like Guam tap water, right? We want our words to be like reverse osmosis, that sweet water that you buy at the store, okay? There's a word, it's called redacted. And, you know, when the government releases information, they'll mark out all the things they don't want you to know. And that means to be redacted. It means to edit, especially in order to obscure or remove sensitive information. So the John F. Kennedy files, I think they've been all released, but I'm sure they're very well redacted. Why does the government do that, you think? Because they don't want you to know certain things, right? Similarly, we need to be editing and redacting our words. You know, Jesus said, but I say to you that every idle word men may speak, they will give account in the day of judgment. Sometimes when I read Ellen White, I think, oh man, she expects way too much of us. But you know what? Jesus expects even more. You know, every single word, everything you say, you're going to have to account for in the day of judgment. Isn't that a scary thought? We think Jesus is all about love, but sometimes he's pretty strict, right? Let's go on. Okay, you guys are in James. Let's look up James 5:9. Do not blank against one another, brethren, lest you be condemned. Behold, the judge is standing at the door. Very similar concept. Something is going to cause us to be judged. Somebody other than, anyone else find it? Anyone else find it? Only the person with the phone? Anyone? Orion, have you found James? Anyone else? James 5:9? I want the kids to find it if they can. I think someone's found it. 9. Do not, what's the blank? Correct. Yes. Some versions say complain. Another word is grumble. When you look up the word complain or grumble in the thesaurus, there's other words that are associated. to criticize, to bemoan, to gripe, or to find fault. What's the focus of this verse? For me, it's brethren. Who do we complain about the most? Our family and our church family. Isn't it easy to do that? The people that you interact with the most, the people that you expect the most from, like, don't you have certain expectations of your own family, that they treat you a certain way, or your church family, and when they don't, it's easy to complain. It's easy to find fault. Let's go to Matthew 7:5. Can you guys find Matthew 7:5? Jesus says, "Hypocrite, first remove the plank from your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye." So kids, when Jesus said this, who was he talking to? Does anyone know? Anyone know? He was talking to the Pharisees, right? The Jewish leaders. He was telling the leaders that they were being hypocrites. Okay, how about this? What is a hypocrite? A hypocrite is someone who says one thing and tells other people to do one thing, but then they go and do something else, right? Don't we all hate hypocrites? Right? You know what? When you look around this room, do you see a few hypocrites? But in reality, was Jesus only talking to the Pharisees? Who do you think he's actually talking to in this verse? He's talking to us, right? And so if you take this verse and you apply it to somebody else, then you are not applying this verse properly. This verse needs to apply to us. And that's why sometimes it's easier to become a Christian than to stay a Christian, right? A lot of people come into the church, but how many people actually stay in the church? Why do they leave? A lot of times it's because of hypocrisy. You know, at first everyone seems really nice. When someone first comes to church, they're really on fire. Everyone seems like they're really good and perfect. And then after maybe a few months, they start to see some flaws. And that really, it's hard. It's hard, isn't it? Matthew 18 tells us how we should deal with each other, right? The first step when we have a problem with someone is we need to go to them one-on-one, right? You know, have you ever been criticized? Is it different receiving criticism from someone you know and trust and you know they have your best interest in mind versus someone who's just kind of out to get you? Like, isn't that a very different experience? How is it that we can be the type of people who can say things to other people and have it be received the right way? What is it that we need to do to make sure that our criticism, when it's absolutely necessary, is done in the right way? We have to have love, right? Let's see, 1 John 3:6. Okay, it's a small book. It's hard to find, so I'm not gonna make you find this. But by this we know we love, because he laid down his life for us. We also ought to lay down our lives for the, come on adults, finish it for me, the brethren. You know, if we don't have the willingness, the enough love to sacrifice ourselves for our brethren, we probably shouldn't be criticizing them. You know, you know why we criticize people? It's not because we're so concerned about them. We criticize them because they're bothering us, right? Because they're doing something to us. They're driving us crazy. So really, the criticism is about us, isn't it? Not necessarily because we love them, you know? Now, how do we get to that place where we can be in a position where we really love someone enough to die for them? Is that an easy thing to accomplish? Can we do that? It's possible, but only through prayer, right? Only when we get on our knees and we ask God to give us that kind of sort of love. Yes. So, how many of you in this room eat pork? Squid? Octopus? All right. Good. Honestly, I like that. Okay. Now, Jesus said, not what goes into the mouth defiles a man, but what comes out of the mouth, this defiles a man. So I know we're all Adventists, so we don't eat certain things. We don't want to defile our bodies with pork and seafood and all kinds of stuff, right? Although we do binge on sugar and processed foods. But sometimes we are much more concerned about what goes into the mouth than what comes out. But in reality, what defiles us? What comes out of the mouth? Let's go to, this is from Desire of Ages. The words are an indication of what is in the heart. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaketh. But the words are more than an indication of character. They have power to react on the character. Men are influenced by their own words. I bolded the area that I thought was very insightful. Your words actually have the power to change you. Isn't that, like, have you ever thought about, I actually never thought about that before. We just say things because it's on our minds. We just say them. You know, we might say things to our brothers and sisters or our family members. We may just say things to our friends. But actually, our words have influence on us. Men are influenced by their own words. Often under a momentary impulse prompted by Satan, they give utterance to jealousy or evil surmising, expressing that which they do not really believe, but the expression reacts on the thoughts. They are deceived by their words and come to believe that true which was spoken at Satan's instigation. So sometimes we say things under the influence of Satan, and then we end up believing them. It becomes reinforced in our minds. Earnest workers have no time for dwelling upon the faults of others. We cannot afford to live on the husks of others' faults or failings. Evil speaking is a twofold curse. Okay, kids, this is a very important point that I'm going to ask you at the end, and I want you to give me the answer. There's two reasons why we should not speak poorly of others. Okay? Evil speaking is a twofold curse, falling more heavily upon the speaker than the hearer. So when you say bad things about people, how do they feel? Not good, right? So they're hurt. So number one, we shouldn't say bad things about other people because they're hurt. But what is the other reason why we shouldn't say those things? Because it's actually worse for us. He who scatters the seeds of dissension and strife reaps in his own soul the deadly fruits. The very act of looking for evil in others develops evil in those who look. Jesus said, by beholding, we are changed. What happens if we're always looking at the faults of others? Are we becoming more like Jesus or becoming more like them? That's the question. By dwelling upon the faults of others, we are changed into the same image. You know, let's see, there's one more quote here. Words of reproach react on one's own soul. The training of the tongue should begin with ourselves personally. Let us speak evil of no man. Now, Ellen White wrote this, I don't know, 150 years ago, something like that, 200 years ago maybe. And it's not really, it doesn't seem to actually necessarily be true. This doesn't necessarily have to be true. But science is catching up to Ellen White. A book written by Dr. Chalmers called Healing the Broken Brain. This is what he says. There are physical changes to the neural pathways by strong, emphatic words that are uttered, thus influencing our actions. So when you say things, it actually changes your brain and influences who you are. Your character is being formed in part by the words that you're in that same direction. Let's see. Okay. Philippians 2:3 says, "Let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit, but in lowliness of mind let each esteem others better than himself." You know, the only reason we can criticize anyone is because we think we're better, right? Like you wouldn't criticize someone for when you do the exact same thing they're doing, right? So if we are to follow what Paul says and esteem others better than ourselves, we can't be criticizing them. Steps to Christ. If we keep uttermost in our minds the unkind and unjust acts of others, so if we keep thinking about what other people are doing and saying that are wrong, we shall find it impossible to love them as Christ has loved us. So as long as we're talking about other people, can we love them? You know, James says, out of your mouth comes blessings and cursings. This should not be. We should not be blessing and cursing through the same mouth, right? And we can't love someone as we are tearing them down. And that's like, I think, the most important thing we want to learn today. You know, Revelation lists the tribes of the 144,000. There's 12 tribes. But the 12 tribes are not always the same. From Jacob's sons to Revelation, there are some changes. There are 2 tribes that are left out. One was Ephraim. In Hosea, it says Ephraim was following idols, and he should be left alone. And so in Revelation, he is not included. However, Simeon, Judah, and Levi, they're all included. Were they good people? No. What did they do to Joseph? They all sold Joseph as a slave. They were murderers. They were adulterers. They did a lot of bad things, right? But who was left out? Ephraim and Dan. Now, Dan had some good qualities. This is not me. I'm just talking about Dan, the tribe. All right. Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes. So Dan was a good judge of character. He had good discernment. But this is what then the next verse, Jacob talks about, what will Dan's downfall be? Dan shall be a serpent by the way, an adder in the path that biteth the horse's heels so that the rider shall fall backwards. What is this talking about? It means that like a snake that comes up behind the horse and bites the heel to cause us to fall, that's Dan. He's kind of sneaky, going behind people's backs, talking about them, you know, creating dissent, strife. And this is the person that didn't get into 144,000. Why is that? Okay, kids. Psalms 115, 1-3. Lord, who shall abide in thy tabernacle? So who is going to be in heaven? Who's going to live in heaven with God? Who shall dwell in thy holy hill? He that walketh uprightly and worketh righteousness, speaketh the truth in his heart. He that backbiteth not with his tongue, nor do evil. So in this verse about who's going to be in heaven, it specifically talks about people who are backbiters. Do you know what a backbiter is? Someone who goes and bites someone's bottom? Is that a backbiter? That's kind of literally what it means. Anyone have an answer? Uncle Jesse, what is a backbiter? Close. A backbiter is someone who, okay, let me give you the definition. Oops. I'm sorry. A backbiter is someone who says mean or unkind things about a person who is not present. So you're talking behind someone's back. So, you know, I want to stress the importance of this backbiting business, because we say things and we just say things and we don't think they matter, right? Okay. Okay, I want you to look at Romans. I actually want you to look this up, okay? Romans 28:31. Now, Paul is listing all of the sins that are going to keep you out of the kingdom of heaven. Okay, these are big things. Even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a debased mind to do things which are not fitting, being filled with all unrighteousness, sexual immorality, wickedness, covetousness, maliciousness, full of envy, murder, strife, deceit. Deceit is like lying. Evil-mindedness, they are whisperers, blank, haters of God, violent, proud, boasters, inventor of evil things, disobedient to parents, undiscerning, untrustworthy, unloving, unforgiving, unmerciful. These are some really bad things. Murderers, strife, liars. Okay, can you fill in the blank? Slanderers, or some versions say backbiters. So when Paul lists the things of really bad things you can do, backbiting is right in there, right up there with murder. Why? Because we are murdering people with our minds. Jesus said, if you hate your brother, it's like murdering him. Okay. We all have this tendency to be backbiters, don't we? Psalms, whoever secretly slanders his neighbor, him I will destroy. The one who has a haughty look and a proud heart, him I will not endure. Let no unwholesome word proceed from your mouth, but only such a word as is good for edification, according to the need of the moment, so that it will give grace to those who hear. I think that this is emphasized because people who backbite don't really know it's bad. They just think it's no big deal, you know? But what does God says? God says he will not endure you if you are doing this. So, what can we do? What is the solution to backbiting? How can we overcome our backbiting? Romans 12:21 says, do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with, kids, you should know this without having to look it up. You should overcome evil with good. How do we do that, though? Okay. Can you read this for me? 1 Thessalonians 5:16 through 18.
Criticize always, accuse without ceasing, in everything complain, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus for you.
Does that sound right? What's wrong with this verse? Let's go to the real version here. Rejoice always, pray without ceasing, in everything give thanks, for this is the will of God in Christ for you. Can you give thanks for the people that drive you crazy? Can you do that? The first solution, as I mentioned before, is to, when you know what, let's say that you and your friend are just complaining about your other friend who's, I don't know, whatever they did or said, you know, like, I'm sure in college or wherever you are, or in life or at school, someone's doing something to drive you crazy, and you and your friend are talking about that person. And if your friend said, oh, let's pray, and then you prayed, when you get up, can you continue that conversation? It gets really awkward, doesn't it? It's because you can't pray to God and criticize someone at the same time. We can only criticize people when we're under the influence of Satan, actually. You know what I mean? So when we are criticizing, who are we sort of serving at that moment? Are we serving God or are we serving Satan? Yeah, I think that's a pretty obvious answer. So anytime you feel like criticizing someone, you should pray for them. You should pray for them and you should pray for yourself, right? To give you that heart of love and to be able to rejoice in that moment, in whatever you're experiencing with God. Number 2, remember that you cannot read hearts. You do not know the motives which prompted the actions that looked wrong. There are many who have not received the right education. Their characters are warped, they are hard and gnarled, and seem to be crooked in every way, but the grace of Christ can transform them. Now, we need to give people grace. We need to understand that maybe they've been through things. They've experienced things. Maybe they have certain genetic tendencies. Maybe they've been scarred from prior trauma. I don't know. It's easy to criticize. It's hard to be full of grace and understanding and mercy and trying to maybe see things from their standpoint and trying not to see the worst in the situation, but giving people the benefit of the doubt. Okay? Being willing to give people grace because Christ died for them just like he died for you. Right? Cultivate. Do you guys know what cultivate means? Cultivate. Cultivate is an agricultural word. It's like to grow. When you cultivate a field, that means you're growing wheat or papayas or watermelon, whatever. You're cultivating that field. So is it easy to cultivate, to farm? Not necessarily. Cultivate the habit of speaking well of others. Isn't it easy to speak badly of others? But how often do we speak well of them? Dwell upon the good qualities of those whom you associate and see as little as possible of their errors and failings. When tempted to complain of what someone has said or done, praise something in that person's life or character. Cultivate thankfulness. Praise God for his wonderful love in giving Christ to die for us. It never pays to think of our grievances. Listen, it never pays to think of our grievances. God calls upon us to think of his mercy and matchless love, that we may be inspired with praise. I've experienced this just recently. There's some people that I work at school or whatever, and they're pushy and difficult and arrogant. But in some situations, they're very helpful. And so, you know what? We should be careful to judge people because, what did Jesus say? We are going to be judged by the same standard that we apply to others. And so if we were to lower our standards, we would then be afforded that same low standard. Let's have the low standard for others and maybe a higher standard for ourselves instead of the other way around. It's much easier to have higher standards for others and then overlook your own faults, isn't it? All right. So, number 1, pray. Number 2, rejoice always and cultivate good thoughts of others. This is what a dream that Ellen White had. I dreamed that I was in a garden and one who seemed to be the owner of the garden was conducting me through its paths. I was gathering the flowers, enjoying their fragrance with the sister who had been walking by my side, called my attention to some unsightly briars. Briars are thorns, okay? So they're walking through this garden, and there's a bunch of thorns in the garden that were impeding her way. There she was mourning and grieving. She was not walking the pathway, following the guide, but was walking among the briars and thorns. So instead of walking with the guide, she was walking in the thorns. And what was happening? She was getting hurt. The thorns were scratching, and she was having a miserable time. Oh, she mourned, is it not a pity that this beautiful garden is spoiled by thorns? Then the guide said, let the thorns alone, for they will only wound you. Gather the roses and the lilies and the pinks. You know, life is full of beauty, and it is also full of suffering, unfortunately. And we can choose to focus on the things that are evil, the things that are bothering us, or we can choose to focus on what is good. Next thing. Consecrate yourself to God in the morning. Make this your very first work. Let your prayer be, take me, O Lord, as wholly thine. I lay all my plans at thy feet. Use me today in thy service. Abide in me, and let my work be wrought in thee. This is the daily matter. If you consecrate your day to God, you have a chance. If you don't, you're done. You have to get up in the morning. I realize that if I skip my morning devotional, I just skip it the whole day. Like there's no good time to do it except in the morning. And that is our chance. That is our opportunity to be right with God. So, I have a summary for you guys. I want you to write these 6 things down. Okay? Number 1, How do we overcome backbiting? Number one, we have to realize it's bad. I hope I have driven that point home. It's not a good thing to backbite. Be slow to speak and quick to listen. So we need to be good listeners and talk less. Do not speak words of criticism. Why? Now, I told you I was going to ask you this. What are the 2 reasons, kids, why you should not speak evil of others? Yes, it hurts them and it hurts you more. Remember that. Constructive criticism requires self-sacrificing love. Without love, your criticism will be totally disregarded anyways. They're not going to listen to you. They don't care what you say if you're not doing it in a loving manner. So it's not even worth saying. So until you have that loving attitude, it's probably a good idea not to say anything to them either, even one-on-one. If you feel the need to criticize, what should your first instinct be? To pray. To pray. If you feel like saying something, stop and pray. If you can remember to do that, then your criticism, your problem will solve itself. Because guess what? You can't pray and curse people at the same time, right? Focus on the good qualities in people. It's easy to focus on their faults. You know why? Because it makes us feel better, right? I'm a little better than that person because at least I'm not doing that, right? Okay. And consecrate ourselves daily to the Lord. I'm going to end with this. Oh, sorry. Ephesians 4:30 to 32. Let's see. I'll just read it. Actually, I'll just put it up and read it. Okay. I'll just read it. Okay. And do not grieve the Holy Spirit of God, by whom you were sealed for the day of redemption. Let all bitterness, wrath, anger, clamor, and evil speaking be put away from you with all malice. So let's put away all our resentment, all of our anger, all of our hypocrisy, and be kind to one another, tenderhearted, forgiving one another, even as Christ has forgiven you. We need to remember how much grace and mercy we've received, and unlike the evil servant, be willing to extend the same to others.